Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 18 of season 6 of the Fat Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Asha Lamy. I'm somewhat excited about the fact that my book is coming out a week from today, and everything you're about to hear today is in my book. And so I'm very excited about that. I just thought I had to tell you about it. Today, we're going to be talking about Big Pharma and just how Big Pharma influences your life on a daily basis, specifically when it comes to weight and weight loss and weight stigma. It's going to be a doozy. Without further ado, actually, let's just get into it. I don't have to sell this one to you. Hopefully, you're invested right from the beginning. In 2020, Ozempic, the drug Ozempic, and Novo Nordisk $3.2 billion. In 2020, Ozempic was being prescribed for diabetes, and Novo Nordisk $3.2 billion. That's nothing to sniff at. 3.2 billion. That's 9 zeros, right? Like, yes. I have to think about that. It's a lot of zeros, folks. It's a lot of money. Yeah. By 2025, Ozempic and in 1 year, Ozempic and Novo Nordisk 19 billion. 3.2 billion when it was being used to treat diabetes. 19 billion when it was used to treat fatness, even though it's not actually licensed for fatness. That is no mean feat, right? That is special. That is a 500% growth. That is not just good fortune. Something terrible had to happen to you and me in order for that to be remotely possible. Novo Nordisk, the manufacturers of Ozempic, had a very clear strategy. First, create the market. Then pay for the research. Then pay for the guidelines. Then train the doctors. Then lobby the politicians. And market directly to you, the consumer. We've already talked about how they've created the market. We already talked about how they pay for the research. Let's talk about the rest. So, first of all, the guidelines that doctors like myself use to treat people in our offices, sitting on that chair, lying on that table, waiting for us to make a diagnosis to pronounce the treatment. Those guidelines are paid for by the drug companies. For example, the NICE guidelines that promote that approved Wegovy for weight loss. The only people in the room were Novo Nordisk and charities that were funded by Novo Nordisk, patient representatives that had ties to Novo Nordisk, doctors and experts who were paid for or had ties with, Novo Nordisk, financial ties with Novo Nordisk. So they were basically the only people in the room when the guidelines were created. The American Diabetes Association guidelines, I told you last week, or the week before, $10 million in 1 year. And all of a sudden the guidelines are saying weight loss, weight loss, weight loss. They pay for the research and they pay for the guidelines. It's that simple. And if you ever, if you're a doctor and you fancy it, take a look at the guidelines, go to the actual evidence, look at who was in the room when it happened. Look at the list of stakeholders. Look at the disclosure of incidents. Look at all the people who are on the guidelines panel, on the guidelines committee, and see how many of them declared an interest, how many of them are funded by, how many people are taking money for speaking fees and conferences, etc., from drug companies, specifically Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. Go take a look for yourself. It becomes very clear who's in the room. Then there is the ABPI, which stands for the Association for the British Pharmaceutical Industry. You'll have an equivalent in wherever you live. And again, this is just a lobbying group. It's just it's a group that it's funded by the drug industry, and they get to be in the room again as the experts. The ABPI get to be sit in on every meeting. They get to say, they get to influence and shape clinical guidelines. So they create the market, they pay for the research, they fund the guidelines. Then they train the doctors. In Novo Nordisk's case, it was a big there's a sort of it shows just how unethical it is. Doctors are used to getting sales pitches from drugs reps, right? Like that's part of our job, you know. And when we know we're getting a sales pitch from a drug rep, we treat it like a sales pitch, right? We know we're trying to they're trying to sell us something, and we don't take their word for it. And we don't assume that they're correct. And we don't just look at that friendly drug rep and think, oh, yeah, just because you're giving me a free sandwich, I'm going to trust you. We don't. But that's because we know that they're drug reps. The problem is when we don't. Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you a story. In 2022, I believe it was, Novo Nordisk was found guilty of breaching the ABPI's code of practice. Why? Because they paid a private company to run quote unquote independent training for up to 13,000 healthcare professionals. 13,000 of them. It was not independent training, it was paid for by Novo Nordisk, and it was a GLP-1 sales pitch. So basically, if you look through the details, I can't remember how many slides were dedicated to GLP-1s versus one slide dedicated to all the other drugs out there. They really like slated the other drugs. Basically, they presented GLP-1s as the future, the only thing you should be doing for your patients in the future. And they did more than that. They did way more than that. They were very, very sneaky. So even though there was no mention of the fact that it was Novo Nordisk, all the details of the people who signed up for this course, this training course, were passed on to Novo Nordisk. They also did this whole big thing about how much money you could make as a healthcare professional from privately prescribing GLP-1. So they gave this whole sales pitch. This is how much money you could make. This was supposed to be independent training. Basically, the healthcare professionals showed up thinking they were going to learn all about weight management, quote unquote. And instead, they got a sales pitch. If you prescribe GLP-1s, you can make this much money. And then, even beyond that, they were given a particular form that non-doctors can use to prescribe medications. So healthcare professionals that aren't doctors can use this particular form to prescribe a medication without a doctor's permission. They actually handed them out to people. That's what they did. And that was in breach of the very strict rules in play that prevents, I can't remember the exact term they use, it's in the book. It's all in the book. But basically, multiple breaches between 2015 and 2022. There was also lots of undisclosed payments. They were missing disclosure deadlines. They were doing all sorts of unethical shit. And it was really interesting that this was fairly well known, and people had been talking about it for a while, but it didn't become a formal complaint, and it wasn't acted upon until the president of the ABPI stepped down, because it turns out he wasn't just the president of the ABPI. He was also the manager, the director of Novo Nordisk UK. So the guy in charge of the ABPI just happened to be a Novo Nordisk employee, not just employee, top dog in Novo Nordisk UK. So the ABPI went, that's very naughty, and slapped them on the wrist. And they suspended their membership for 2 years. Only the 8th time they've ever done that in the history of the ABPI. The 8th time. Shocking. It was all very performative. Very, very performative. They audited them, right? So Novo Nordisk had to do their own audit. I love this. So Novo Nordisk gets told, you have to do your own internal audit, and you have to find all of these undisclosed payments, and you have to write it all out on a piece of paper, probably an Excel spreadsheet, and you have to present it to us. And they did. They found £7.8 million in payments between 2015 and 2022. Well, I can't remember what the timing was. £7.8 million, Novo Nordisk said. Oops, terribly sorry. And then these independent researchers were like, we don't believe you. And so they did their own study, and they found a further £1,244,027 that they refused to disclose. They didn't disclose. After being told off, being suspended, having their wrist slapped, being told you must produce your own internal audit, they still lied. They said 7.8 million. It was actually closer to 8.5 million. Lying dirtbags, because that's what they're like. They lie a lot. They lie and they're, oh, it's a mistake, sorry. It wasn't a mistake. Oh, it was terribly sorry. My bad. We won't do it again. And this is the problem. There is no means of penalising companies for doing this. They just get away with it. So, as I said, they got suspended from the ABPI, which just basically means they weren't allowed to sit in on the meetings for 2 years. There was no like fines, there was no criminal liability, there was no suspension of their license to sell their medicines. So they were still selling their medicines. It's just basically told to sit on the naughty step for a couple of years. That's it. That's what's happening. That's what happens when they go and do something they had no business doing. 13,000 healthcare professionals. That's a lot of healthcare professionals. It's very unethical and it's very typical. So, as I said, they failed to disclose payments to multiple organizations. And this is another thing that drug companies do. So they educate, they pay for the training, sometimes unethically and illegally, but they also have partnerships, financial partnerships, which is basically funding, sponsoring, whatever you want to call charities and healthcare organizations. And one of the ones they failed to disclose payments to is an organization called the World Obesity Federation. Now, I've probably mentioned these guys before. I'm a bit of a Trekkie, so I don't like the fact that they call themselves a federation. Like, I think that that's wrong and they should change their name as a Trekkie. But what is the World Obesity Federation, you might be asking? It's a charity, it's a registered UK charity that operates across the globe. And I'm not going to tell you too much about them because they are problematic. But two-thirds of their 2024 income, I went and had a look at it. I looked at all the data and did all the calculations. Two-thirds of their 2024 income came from two sources, Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. That's it. So the World Obesity Federation is essentially paid for by two drug companies. So what does it do? It's a charity. It's a charity for fat people. What does it do? Like, I don't know, if it's a charity for fat people, I'd like to think that they support fat people, maybe advocate for fat people, maybe help fat people who are being stigmatized, being denied medical care, help people, maybe fund private operations if the NHS refuses to do it, or if your insurance company refuses to pay for it. This is a charity that will go, don't worry, we'll pay for it because we're a charity for fat people, right? Like, that to me sounds like a lovely charity. I'm on board with a charity like that. That's not what the World Obesity Federation does. So what do they do? What do they do? Well, they host an annual international conference where all the people who work in quote unquote obesity medicine come together and confer. Ticket prices range from about $500 to well over $1,000, depending on what you're doing and when you buy the tickets. So, like, it's not a free conference, right? That's not a charitable conference. You pay for that. You pay a lot of money to go to that conference. They produce 4 separate peer-reviewed journals, but again, people pay for membership of the journal. Like, journals aren't free, you have to pay for those too. They have four peer-reviewed journals, and you will recognize some of them because they're like, obesity is one of the main ones. They run a clinical education program for healthcare professionals around the world. SCOPE, it's called. They love their acronyms. SCOPE. The thing is, again, it's run. It's free. It's essentially either free or very low cost. So that's because the training is, and I'm quoting now, partially supported by independent medical education grants from, guess who? Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. So it's not independent training. It is funded by, yeah. And they'll say, oh, they have absolutely nothing to do with the content of the training. Sure, we believe you. Okay, if you say so. Nothing to do with it. I'm sure. I believe you. That's just, there you go. If you look at their website and you look at their sponsors, in 2025, their sole platinum supporter was Eli Lilly. Eli Lilly is described as playing a pivotal role in their endeavors. It's not Novo Nordisk, because it used to be, but it's not anymore because of all the trouble Novo Nordisk got in. So yeah. Novo Nordisk, what they do is it's in parentheses. They sponsor special projects. That's what they do. They sponsor special projects. So it's not the same. They're not platinum supporters. They do things in other ways. In 2022, they co-hosted an event alongside the World Obesity Federation at the United Nations General Assembly. Sit with that for a moment. At the United Nations General Assembly. This is how pharmaceutical executives get access to politicians and policymakers around the world. Right? Because we have an inherent sense of mistrust when it comes to big pharma, right? Like, oh, it's a bit dodgy just to have like, a pharmaceutical exec talking to policymakers. Like, people feel a bit anxious about that. But a healthcare organization, they can come and go as they please and do whatever they want. And this is the healthcare organization. These are the people we trust. I'm talking about Diabetes UK, Cancer Research UK. Like these are the organizations we trust, right? But they're getting sponsored by the pharmaceutical industry. So it's a way of hiding those financial ties. And most of you, well, some of you might have, but many of you won't have even heard of the World Obesity Federation. But you do know about them. You may not realize, but you do know about them. They're the people who created World Obesity Day. It's held every year at the beginning of March. It almost every year coincides with Eating Disorders Awareness Week. So again, sit with that for a moment. Um, they have an enormous influence on public opinion. They have an enormous influence on the media. This is how the weight loss industry gets their message out there through organizations, healthcare organizations that they sponsor. For example, in March of this year, on World Obesity Day, I tend to avoid all media during that week. But I was doing it for the purpose of the book. I was doing some research. So there was a Guardian article. I was like, which one is it? What'll it be? The Guardian article read, more than 220 million children will be obese by 2040. They're obsessed with children at the moment. And that was the article in the Guardian. So again, not my favorite paper, but it was in the Guardian, which is a left-leaning newspaper. That's what it is. And it was an article. It wasn't. I mean, this wasn't a. I mean, they call themselves journalists. I don't think it was journalism. They just got a PR statement and recycled it and turned it into an article. Didn't do any journalism per se. It wasn't hard work. They just recited what the World Obesity Federation gave them because it was a report that was funded by the WOF, was funded by drug companies. This report they're talking about. Whenever you see these articles, I mean, I would advise you just not to read them, but if you're curious, look through. There's always something. There's a report somewhere. Try and find the fine print. Click on the link if there's one. Who paid for this report? It's almost always drug companies. This is what's going on. And I just want you to think about it for a moment. Imagine a children's welfare charity, right? Imagine there's a charity set up to maintain the mental and emotional well-being of children that is primarily funded by energy drink companies. Would you trust them? Imagine if Gamblers Anonymous was sponsored by betting sites. Would that be okay? Like, what if Cancer Research UK was taking money from the tobacco industry? Would we have a problem with that? Because this is a conflict of interest. This is literally the definition of a conflict of interest. If you are an organization that is financially dependent on private companies whose agenda directly contradicts their stated mission, your stated mission, then that's a conflict of interest. And that is exactly what is happening here. Because this so-called obesity charity claims that they are advocating for fat people, that they are interested in the health and well-being of fat people, but they're not. They're interested in selling weight loss drugs. That's not cool. It's not okay. And it's they're not the World Obesity Federation is not interested in advocating for fat people who don't want to engage in weight loss. So it's not an obesity charity, it's a weight loss charity. Except it's not a charity because they're not giving anything away for free. According to an article in the Observer newspaper, Novo Nordisk spent £27 million over a period of 3 years on experts and charities who publicly championed Wegovy around the time that it was, approved for weight loss and, the whole furore that came, like I said, the feeding frenzy that came with it. According to the articles, many of these experts who were paid for that didn't actually declare their financial ties. They just went on record, were interviewed in articles, and newspaper articles and in the news and on the radio and social media and everywhere you turn. There were all these experts saying, oh, these drugs are amazing. And they were paid for by the drug company. £27 million over 3 years. That's a lot of money, but it's nothing compared to how much money they earn from that drug. So we've got paying for the education of doctors, paying for the research, paying for the guidelines, paying to educate doctors, paying for these healthcare organizations that get allowed into every room. And then we've got the actual lobbying. Because don't forget, drug companies lobby politicians. In the UK, where the rules are a little bit stricter, they do so through the direct funding of the all-party parliamentary groups. And if you don't know what the APPGs are, look it up. That's how drug companies like Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly come along and pay for the all-party parliamentary group on obesity. That's how it works. That's how drug companies lobby politicians. In the US, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more because in the UK we're talking less than £100,000. In the US, millions. So in the US, literally, drug companies are spending millions annually on federal lobbying, on campaign donations. They hire teams of lobbyists who influence legislation, all sorts of things. In fact, according to one article that I read, the pharmaceutical and health product makers, so basically Big Pharma, spend more than any other industry on lobbying the federal government between 1999 and recently. I can't remember. It's from an article in JAMA, I should say. So the Journal of the American Medical Association. There is an article, I don't remember when it was published, but it wasn't that long ago, that basically found pharmaceutical and health product makers spend more money than any other industry on lobbying the federal government. Found another article, I think it's from the JAMA article, that says Pfizer, Amgen and Eli Lilly were the biggest, no, this can't be from that article, another article. Pfizer, Amgen and Eli Lilly were the biggest corporate spenders in 2025. Eli Lilly spent over 11 million in federal lobbying alone in 2025. 11 million in federal lobbying alone in 2025. They also spent however many millions on all the other things, like, but just on federal lobbying. That's federal lobbying, right? Between 2010 and 2021, according to another website, they spent almost $1 billion. 95,877,000. So 96 million. Sorry, that's bad maths. It's not 960 million, it's 96 million. Not $1 billion. That was a lie. That would have been very bad financial idea. But they still spent 96 million, which is a lot of fucking money. 96 million between 2010 and 2021 on federal lobbying. This figure does not include state lobbying, where Eli Lilly lobbied at least 46 states in 2021. So basically all the states. Eli Lilly also lobbies abroad, spending roughly $1 billion on lobbying in Europe in 2021, for example. So lobbying is huge. They are, they have ties to politicians, and that is a problem because, again, this very much influences how the world works. What drugs get approved? What drugs are used in certain situations? What drugs get approved in insurance companies, etc., etc., etc. So I want you to put all of that together, right? All of this shit that's going on. And now I'm going to remind you of a very recent lesson that we learned. We don't have to go very far back in history to learn this lesson. Just a very recent one. And I want you to just see the similarities. In 1996, the FDA approved Purdue's drug, OxyContin, for moderate to severe pain. The thing that made OxyContin different from other painkillers was that it was a slow-release drug. So they took their slow-release formula and they applied it to a very run-of-the-mill. Oxycodone's not a great opiate. It's not the best. It's not even in the top 10. Maybe, I don't know how many they are, but you know what I mean? It was an average opioid. They applied their slow release, and the thing that made it special was they got it approved for moderate to severe pain. It wasn't for cancer pain. It was for moderate to severe pain. Over the next 5 years, Purdue conducted more than 40 conferences at resorts across the US that were attended by thousands of physicians, pharmacists, and nurses. They funded more than 20,000 pain-related educational programs through direct sponsorship or financial grants. They ordered their drug reps to downplay the harms and reassure doctors the drugs were safe, despite growing concerns of addiction risk. You probably all know this story. Hopefully you've watched TV shows or you read the book or, you've watched a documentary, something. You know this. This happened in very recent history. You were probably alive when it happened. By 2004, OxyContin had become one of the most prevalent drugs of abuse in the United States. It sparked an opioid epidemic that we are still very much living with today, decades later. One drug company, a group of very greedy, very greedy, selfish, cruel, despicable human beings, the Sackler family, who cared only about profit and were willing to go to any lengths, most of them illegal, definitely unethical, to make money at the expense of you and everyone. And you're feeling it. Even if you are not somebody who is addicted to opioids, even if you don't know anyone who is addicted to opioids, which is lucky because most people know at least one person. But even if that's not your personal experience, you no longer have access to opioids when you need them, when it's clinically indicated because of this. They had to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Literally nobody gets access to opioids anymore. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes opioids are really important and very useful. But they are limited. Our use of them is very limited because of what's happened, because of our fear of addiction. A legitimate fear because of what happened. So, in my opinion, Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly have studied the Purdue Playbook and gone, that's clever, let's do that. And they've just literally copied it. The conferences, the education programs, the financial partnerships, the charities, the patient organizations, the professional societies, all of this, the drug reps that are downplaying the risks, it's all the same. It's all exactly the same. The lines between independent medical advice and pharmaceutical marketing are completely blurred. It's just it's a bit incestuous, if I'm honest. It's quite gross. Everybody knows everybody. Everyone goes to the same conferences and sits on the same panels, and they all know each other, and they're all like, "Yeah, bring my friend on board." And then, they talk to this politician and they lobby that person and they pay for that person's political campaign, and it's just all gross. It's really, really fucking gross. Because this is healthcare, and none of that should be involved. There is literally no reason why the pharmaceutical industry should have any influence whatsoever on clinical guidelines. Like, they just shouldn't be allowed in the room. There should, to quote Donald Trump, build a fucking wall, and put the drug companies on one side and the medical profession on the other side, and there's a big wall and nobody gets to cross it. They don't belong in any of the rooms. It should be illegal for them to sponsor healthcare organizations. It should be illegal for them to sponsor experts. If you are somebody who is going on the record as saying that a drug is good, you should have to be able to prove that you have no financial ties to that drug company. I have never taken a penny from them, and I still think the drug is good. That's okay. You've looked at the evidence, you've decided for yourself, all right, but not if you're getting paid by them. You don't get to be interviewed on national television, in newspaper articles all over the world as a doctor. Stake your professional reputation. Professional reputation, my ass. You're taking thousands, sometimes millions from drug companies. Fuck you. How dare you? That's beyond unethical. So as far as I'm concerned, they shouldn't be allowed to do anything. They shouldn't be allowed to sponsor education programs. There should be no financial partnerships with healthcare organizations that are also involved in healthcare decisions. There should just be a very, very explicit line. Nobody gets to cross it. There's literally no reason for them to be there. None whatsoever, right? We don't need them. They don't buy your own fucking lunch. Do you know what I mean? You don't need them to be there. We have been allowing this to happen for so long now. Most of us, and when I say us, I'm talking about healthcare professionals, we don't question it anymore. We're just like, oh yeah, that's how it is. Why? I remember when I was in medical school, I joined an organization that just basically was say no to a free lunch. And all you had to say was, I'm not going to accept a free lunch from a medical organization, from a drug company, because I want to remain ethical. I'm not going to take a pen or I'm not going to take a, post-it notes or any of the other fucking merch that they send out. And in the UK, there's stricter laws in some countries. Like, they fly you off to the Caribbean, not in the UK. So you just get tat, basically. They give you tat. I don't know. Why should I? It's like we just refuse to learn the lessons in history. With OxyContin, it took years for the full scale of the harm to become clear, by which point in time, millions of people were addicted, thousands of people had died. And then it was like, oh, mea culpa, oh, I'm terribly sorry. And as far as I know, although Purdue no longer exists, although they've been bankrupt eventually filed for bankruptcy. As far as I know, the Sacklers are doing fine. They're great. Still got their yachts and their houses and all that shit. Nothing happened to them. You are the one that suffers. With weight loss injections, we're still very much in the early years. We are circa 1999 or 2000, 2001 maybe, max, when it comes to, if we're comparing ourselves in the story of OxyContin. That's where we're at. Just wait until all the data comes out. Just wait until we suddenly go, oh shit, rather like every other weight loss drug in the planet, this, this drug is causing the very condition it's supposed to be treating. Just like every other drug. Just wait till it all comes out. And then a lot of people were like, oh, that's bad. But you, if you're taking it, if you're the unfortunate one who developed the side effect, who developed the long-term, issues that this drug caused, it's too late for you. Nothing you can do about it. It's the same bullshit, the same prioritization of profit over safety. Same playbook, the same tactics. The only difference is the drug. And this is why all of this put together is why you feel so overwhelmed right now. If you're sitting there thinking, it's all I can think about, it's all everyone talks about is weight loss and GLP-1s and weight loss and GLP-1s. And wherever I go there, weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, weight loss. It's every celebrity and every this and every that. It's all I can think about. It's all I can talk about. It's just there all the time. I wish I could switch it off, but I can't. It's intentional. These drug companies are paying to keep it in the news, paying to keep it on social media. They are bribing politicians. They are bribing healthcare organizations to approve and push these drugs. They are marketing directly or indirectly to you, the customer, intentionally. And yes, I said bribing. You give me another word that best describes it. Influencing? You just, oh, well, no, that's not what's happening. Oh, they're not being bribed. That's exactly, they're taking money and then they're saying the drug is good. What is that? What is that? If you take money to give evidence on a witness stand in a court, it's illegal and you go to prison. If you take money to give evidence in the court of public opinion, when it comes to really important things, life or death issues, medications, you don't even get a slap on, you don't even get a slap on the wrist. You get a pat on the back. This has been a long game, okay? A long game. It has been happening for a really long time. From before you were born. The pharmaceutical industry got in on it before you were born, and certainly since the end of the last century. First, they paid to make obesity a medical condition. Then they created diabetes. They sponsored all of these healthcare organizations. They lobbied all of the politicians. They funded the research, etc., etc. They're spending millions, but they are making billions, and those two things don't compare. Look at the mistake I made. I was like, oh, it's 9 billion. It wasn't 9 billion, it was 96 million. 96 million. 96 million is a lot of money, but they made hundreds of billions over that course of that time, those drug companies. So you're the one who suffers. And you might be thinking, oh, that's great, Ashel. What am I supposed to do about it? And this is actually one of the struggles I had when I was writing my book. I was a lot of like exposing all of the lies and exposing all of the deception. And then I was thinking, yeah, but when you're reading it, like you want to know, well, what am I supposed to do about it? You're basically, essentially, I'm telling you how shit things are. And I want to tell you what to, I want to be able to say to you, but it's okay. It's all right. Don't panic. There's hope, but it's quite hard to do because I don't want to lie to you. So what can you do about it? Here are some things you can do. Number one, you can challenge your doctors. If a doctor is recommending a GLP-1, again, like I said in the last episode, ask them, Which study did that come from? Can you name it specifically so that I can go and research it? You can say, I'm going to, you can say to your doctor, excuse me, can I ask how much, how much money do you take from drug companies? Are you receiving any money in sponsorship? Are you getting paid? Are you letting them pay for conferences, etc., etc.? You can ask them flat out, right? You can ask them, where did you get all of this information about GLP-1s from? Did you research it yourself, or where did you get it from? Like, you can challenge them if you want to. That's okay. You're allowed to do that. I think a lot of people would find that really hard, but you can absolutely do it. You can also, and I think this one works quite well, you can opt out and just say, yeah, I'm not interested. You can say to your doctor, I am not interested in GLP-1s, full stop. That is the end. Do not mention it again. I refuse my consent. Do not mention it. If they have the audacity, after you've said I'm not interested, to mention it again, say, I'm sorry, I refused my consent. Are you forcing me to endure a conversation against my will? Are you making this consultation dependent upon my acceptance of your weight loss lecture? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that you will only treat me if I sit here and listen to a lecture about GLP-1s, even though I told you I didn't want to discuss it? Because then I want you to document it in my notes, because that is fucking illegal. It is not okay, illegal, unethical, whatever. I'm not a lawyer, but it's definitely unethical. It's definitely a breach of their duty of care. If you say, I do not consent to discuss this, you don't consent to discuss it. They don't get to discuss it. No means no. So just say, no, I'm not interested. No. GLP-1s, no, not taking them. Don't have to defend your decision. Don't explain why. Don't, nothing. Just no. Another thing you can do about it is join the No Way movement. And keep an eye on your inbox. If you're in part of my mailing list. If you're not, why not? Come be part of my mailing list. But yeah, join the No Way movement. The whole point of this movement, it's not to, I don't need anything from you. I'm not trying to get anything out of you. But I want you to feel like you're part of something. I want you to feel like, yeah, look, they're this Goliath. The pharmaceutical industry, they're a Goliath. They're scary as fuck. But we're strong too. And we can do something together as a community in our own way. Um, Someone's just knocked on the door. So I'm just going to finish this really quickly. Don't forget that No Way will be available on the 20th of May, which is a week from today. You can still pre-order it on Amazon right now. There's a link in the show notes. And I am really excited for next week's episode. I'm not going to give anything away. It'll come as a surprise. Thanks so much for joining me, and take care.